Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you to everyone here this evening. My name is Christine Svetkevich, and I'm DEQ's Northwest Region Administrator. We all appreciate your time and interest in DEQ's role in regulating the emissions from the Zenith Energy Facility in North Portland. Next slide, please. This is an overview of how we're going to spend our presentation time this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about the air quality permit process, the inspection that recently happened, and DEQ's request for a land use compatibility statement, our recent enforcement order, and we will then answer questions, all the questions that we can. I want to recognize that folks may have a lot of questions tonight after we go through everything, and there are some questions that we may not be able to answer, as we cannot speculate about what might happen in any given scenario. If we can't answer a question, we will do our best to explain why, and I want to acknowledge that this may be frustrating. But we are committed to continuing to share information as soon as we are able regarding the permitting of the Zenith facility. I really appreciate your participation and your engagement tonight, and I'm looking forward to a respectful and productive discussion. Next slide, please. This has a little bit of an overview of what's happened over the last couple months. As folks may know, we posted a draft permit for public input in October, and we had a meeting. We received a lot of questions at the meeting in October, and we also had a number of discussions with Zenith about current activities happening at their site, as well as future projects that are being worked on. And we just determined that we needed some more information. We did a detailed review of the permitting record and a re-review of the land use compatibility statement. As we noted, we did an inspection on November 14th, and we also have had some follow-up information requests to Zenith. So we're going to talk more in detail about the status of the permit and the enforcement action in a moment. But right now, I'm going to pass this to David to provide an overview of the inspection that he conducted on November 14th. David?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the November 13th inspection. Looks like we had a little typo in the previous slide there. I'm David Greiver, Northwest Region Air Quality. So let's move right ahead. Go to the next slide. So this specific inspection, it was designed and implemented as an informational inspection. DEQ, we wanted to gain a better understanding of operations associated with both the McCall and Chevron docks, and check on the status of Zenith's recently submitted notice of approval applications. While on site, we visited both the Chevron and McCall docks and walked the pipelines that transport products to and from the Zenith facility. As mentioned earlier, this was an unannounced inspection. Most of DEQ's inspections are unannounced, and in this case, we wanted a better understanding of how the facility operated, so we wanted to see these operations on what would be considered a normal day. So we'll move to the next slide. So this is in regard to the McCall dock connections. The connection to the McCall dock included the construction of approximately 300 meters of pipe. This is represented by the yellow path on the satellite image shown on the left. The red arrow shows the location where construction began on the McCall property. There was an existing pipeline under Northwest Front Street that transferred asphalt between the two facilities. This pipeline was cleaned out and repurposed for distillate fuels. The photo on the right was taken at the location of the red arrow, facing approximately north. This shows both the existing pipes and the pipe constructed in 2021. The blue arrows highlight the existing pipe segments, and the green arrow indicates the constructed pipe. So we'll move to the next slide. And this shows an overview of the Zenith property. In the upper left, you've got your compass rose showing the direction of north, which is kind of looking northwest almost, and plant north, which they use at the facility. There are three existing pipes connecting the Chevron dock to Zenith, which is indicated by the by the orange arrow, and the pipeline from McCall surfaces in the area indicated by the blue arrow. Um, so more on where the pipe surfaces from the McCall. We move to the next slide. This is where the distillate pipe resurfaces on Zenith's property. All of this pipe was constructed as part of the 2021 connection project. So let's move to the next slide. Zenith also has a notice of approval application that DEQ approved in July 2023 for piping on the McCall property to move renewable fuels between the McCall dock and the Zenith property. During this inspection, Zenith staff did inform DEQ that they have not yet begun construction on this project. And as we move to the next slide, I'm going to transfer this over to Lisa Ball.
Thank you, David. My name is Lisa Ball, and I am one of the Northwest Region Air Quality Managers here at DEQ. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the request we made for the land use compatibility statement to Zenith. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Zenith is permitted. Zenith is currently operating under a Title V permit. Although that permit has expired, Zenith can continue to operate under what is called an application shield. This is an administrative extension allowing them to continue operations while DEQ processes the application because it has submitted a timely and complete renewal application. Zenith also has applied for an ACDP application or ACDP on November 21st of 2022 because the 2022 LUCS required it to transition to a smaller air quality permit. So in general, sources with the Title V permit have higher levels of emission than sources with air contaminant discharge permits. The 2022 LUCS requires Zenith to reduce emissions below major source levels. By requesting the reduced emission limitations, Zenith will transition from a Title V permit to an ACDP. So to kind of summarize that, currently Zenith is operating under their Title V permit and can continue to do so as long as their Title V renewal application is kept up to date. Once the ACDP is in place, it will replace that Title V permit. Next slide. Just quick on what is a LUCS. A LUCS is a land use compatibility statement and DEQ requires a LUCS to obtain a permit, and it's used to verify that the use and activity requested is allowed by the zoning and land and use regulations. And these are issued by the local land use authority, and in this case, that is the city of Portland. Go to the next slide. What we're looking at here is a map provided by Zenith of the tax lots where Zenith is currently operating. Both air permit applications include Zenith operations on multiple tax lots. These include 3 tax lots owned by Zenith, which is represented by the green arrow on the bottom right of your screen. And also tax lots owned by Chevron and McCall, which are the 3 arrows, yellow arrows that are in the top and the bottom left. DEQ's careful re-review of the October 2022 LUCS from the City of Portland revealed that the LUCS does not cover the Chevron and McCall tax lots. Zenith also needs to provide DEQ with a LUCS that covers all of its operations for DEQ to resume processing the ACDP application, and so they can continue operating with their current Title V permit. Therefore, the permitting process remains on pause. Next slide. So what happens next? DEQ must provide a reasonable amount of time for Zenith to obtain that LUCS, and DEQ has requested the LUCS be provided by February 4th, 2025, which is 60 days. So until that time, the permitting process will remain on hold. And that is all for me, and I will hand it over to Becca to discuss the enforcement order.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Becca Puskas. I'm the interim manager of the DEQ Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I'm going to talk about the enforcement case that DEQ issued on December 6th, and that was a $372,000 civil penalty for operating outside the scope of Zenith's Title V permit. I want to start by reiterating some of the comments that Christine made at the beginning of the meeting, which is that I will share a high-level overview of the order that DEQ issued, but I will not be able to comment on anything beyond the four corners of the enforcement document that is a public record and is on our website. There's two main reasons for this. The first one is that Zenith has a right to request a hearing in response to this order. This is a due process right from the Constitution. So it's important that we respect that and their opportunity to respond. And I also can't speculate on what Zenith will do. The second reason is that DEQ's enforcement strategy is something that we do not discuss until the case is resolved. This is consistent with DEQ's obligations under the Oregon Public Records Law. So I'll share an overview of the case we issued, and I'm happy to answer questions about our enforcement process generally, but when we get to the question and answer session, I may not be able to answer all of your questions about the case, and I just want to recognize that may be frustrating, but I'm here because we want to be transparent and talk about the order that we issued within the bounds of the process that we have to follow. Next slide. So here's a timeline of the relevant events regarding the enforcement order. In December 2018, Zenith signed a lease agreement with McCall Oil and related entities, along with some pipeline and access agreements to use the McCall properties. In late 2020 and early 2021, Zenith constructed a connection to the McCall dock that David showed you there from his inspection. For permitting purposes, the importance of this change is that it increases air emissions from Zenith's permitted source. And so, in this case, it wasn't part of the permitted source, but it increases air emissions from Zenith's operations. And so there's two types of air emissions that increase. One is that the pipeline has different valves and connections, and those have fugitive emissions. And the second source of an increase in air emissions is that when Zenith loads ships, there's a displacement of the vapors. And so those vapors going into the atmosphere is an increase in emissions. And so that change triggered an obligation by Zenith to notify DEQ and get approval of the change, and before it operated there, to get it incorporated into its Title V permit. But this didn't happen until April 2024, when Zenith submitted a notice of approval application to DEQ. This submittal was in response to some information requests and a warning letter that DEQ issued. And in June 2024, DEQ approved the notice of approval application. Next slide. So this is that same timeline that I just walked through, and I want to show you how it relates to the violations that we alleged in the enforcement case. So the first violation, thank you, is failing to notify DEQ and obtain approval for the modification. So that was the obligation that was triggered to submit that notice of approval application before constructing the change that increased air emissions, and the penalty for that was $5,400. And then the second violation was for operating that change without approval under the Title V permit. And so that occurred between April 2021 and June 2024, when DEQ approved the notice of approval application. And during that time, that 3-year period, there were 34 loading events at the McCall dock that were not authorized under the Title V permit. And so that is part of the basis of our penalty calculation. And then the other factor that we considered in assessing the penalty was the fact that Zenith has previously submitted notifications to DEQ about other changes at the facility and obtained approval prior to operating those changes. So for loading at the Chevron dock, they submitted a notice to DEQ and got our approval. They've made changes to some of their tanks and for the addition of new rail car racks. And they've notified us of those changes that increase air emissions. But DEQ was not notified of these changes, as I noted, until April 2024 with a notice of approval application. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I missed, and then Michael put the total penalty up there. That was just that last thing. Sorry. Next slide. So I just want to walk you through our formal enforcement process. This is the same process that we follow in every formal enforcement case. So when DEQ issues a notice of civil penalty assessment and order, as I mentioned, that provides a right to a contested case hearing, and the respondent has 20 days from the day they receive our certified mail to request a hearing. If the respondent does not request a hearing, the order becomes final by default. And in this case, if there was no request for hearing, Zenith would then have to pay the penalty to the state general fund. We often do get appeals. It's very common. I would say over half of our cases are appealed for various reasons. As I mentioned, it's entirely up to the respondent whether they want to appeal. And when we get an appeal, we schedule what's called an informal meeting, which is a settlement discussion. And this is the respondent's opportunity to share any facts or information or legal argument that they have in response to our case. And after that conversation and an exchange of information, we will make a settlement offer. And what DEQ is looking for is any facts or information that allow us to change our penalty calculation, which is according to a formula, or any legal arguments that we think are valid. So sometimes we're able to enter into a settlement agreement. I would say that's actually about 95% of our appealed cases we're able to settle based on that exchange of information. And we enter into what's called a mutual agreement and final order. So that becomes the agency's final order in the case. If we're not able to reach a settlement, we send the case to a separate agency called the Office of Administrative Hearings. The case is assigned to an administrative law judge that hears the case, and so DEQ presents evidence and witnesses and lays out its case, and the respondent also presents evidence and witnesses and provides its response. And then the administrative law judge would issue what's called a proposed and final order. There's several layers of appeals that can be had after that. If the administrative law judge's order is not appealed, then it becomes final, but it can be appealed to our Environmental Quality Commission, and then beyond that to the Oregon Court of Appeals. So as you can see, there are many layers to this process, and we can't predict where the process will end at this time for the Zenith enforcement case. And that's all I have.
And thank you, Becca, Lisa, and David for sharing that information. We now have time for questions and answers, so about 40 minutes or so until 7 o'clock. So again, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question verbally. You can do so by hitting that raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, or if you're on a phone, press *9 to raise your hand. There's a good amount of people here tonight, about close to 70. So in case you raise your hand immediately, you might be placed in line. And there's also folks that have asked questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to be bouncing questions between myself and Lauren Vertis, who is my manager, who will be overseeing the Q&A part, or the written Q&A. So we'll take turns between raised hands and written Q&As. I also just want to let you know, again, we can't speculate on what DEQ may or may not do in the future as all of this unfolds. So with that said, I'm going to begin with my first raised hand. And give me 1 second to pull my list up. All right, I've got Kate, you are able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone who presented for helping us understand this more. I have probably a couple connected questions that I'm happy to repeat, but I'm trying to understand. It was my understanding basically that the land use is a requirement for an air permit from DEQ. So given that Zenith does not have or never had the proper land use for both the Chevron and McCall dock, I'm wondering why they're still being allowed to do marine loading at those docks where they don't have land use, and particularly at the McCall dock, which they did the illegal expansion to, because essentially if Zenith were operating within compliance of their current land use approvals, it would be a landlocked facility with no access to marine loading. So I'm trying to understand how they're still being allowed to utilize the McCall and Chevron docks for marine loading without proper land use that I understood to be required for the air permit. And basically, Zenith has been profiting for years off the illegal marine loading of fossil fuels and has been out of compliance the entire time it's been operating here and has shown a real consistent disregard of laws and regulations. So can you help us, just kind of understand both the dock use and why they're still being considered for an air permit? Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to invite Christine to answer your question.
Sure. Thanks, Michael, and thank you for the question, Kate. And I think this is also linked to another question that was also opened. So happy to follow up if there's more on it. But so as it relates to the Title V permit, DEQ authorized the use of the docks and determined that the Title V air permit renewal application was complete when that was submitted to DEQ. And that was not recently. But after further review, more recently, we have determined that the land use compatibility statement that was submitted to DEQ in support of their new ACDP permit application does not cover all the properties where Zenith operates. So specifically, while the LUCS, the land use compatibility statement, generally describes the Zenith's operations on all of the properties, it does not list all of the locations, the tax lots, on which Zenith operates. And so according to our permitting rules, we must request that information from Zenith and provide them a reasonable time to provide it before we make a decision regarding their permit. So that's where we're at in the process right now.
Okay, so there's essentially no repercussions for the use of those marine loading docks without the land use since 2018, and particularly I understand some of the restrictions, but the McCall dock went undetected for 3 years, and this lack of land use went undetected since 2018. So I guess I'm trying to understand it, with Zenith's willingness to disregard the regulatory, limitations and laws. I don't understand at what point it would trigger a revocation of the permit based on the conditions DEQ is restricted by, I guess.
Yeah, I can jump in here a little bit. The LUCS is a permitting requirement. And so our permitting rules say if we review a permit application and determine it's complete, then we're moving forward with processing that application. That's what happened in the past. Now we've looked at it and said there's something missing. And what we're required to do is notify them, give them a reasonable amount of time to give us that missing piece so that we can resume processing it. And so only if we don't get that within a reasonable time would we be looking at denying a permit application. That's the rules that we have to follow. And in terms of just accountability, the enforcement case is the accountability for operating unauthorized on the McCall dock. But that did not occur on the Chevron dock. We did approve the notice they submitted for that dock.
Okay, so any of those repercussions for that land use might fall at the city level then. Okay, thanks for explaining that. That's helpful.
All right, thank you, Christine and Becca. Lauren, is there a question from the chat or from the Q&A that you would like to read aloud?
Yes, I am in fact going to do a little bit. We have a couple questions circulating around the LUCS, and since we're on that topic, I think that'll be helpful. So I can reiterate those for folks who are going to answer them if needed. But there's a question about does Zenith need an additional LUCS? Is it are we I want to make sure I use, are we revoking the current LUCS and saying you need one LUCS that covers all tax lots. Let me start there, and then I have other things tied to that. I'll go step by step.
Okay, I'll take that one. We are not prescribing what we need specifically. What we need is to make sure that we have a land use compatibility statement and approval that matches the air quality application that we are processing in the locations that we are processing it. So however that comes back to us, we are open to it. We don't prescribe how folks we don't prescribe what it will look like, and we don't know, and we haven't had conversations about that.
And you mean prescribe to the city, how that looks?
Correct, or to any jurisdiction, but yes,
Yeah.
thank you for that clarification.
Right. And then the other question about that was about the city's handling of the LUCS, and if we're doing any additional oversight on the city's process for the LUCS.
We are not involved in the city's process for processing the land use compatibility statement applications.
Okay, thank you. All right, Michael, back to you.
All right, thank you. I next raise hand. I have Nikki. You are now welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. I had a question which I'm going to alter a little bit based on your presentation. So please clarify for me. If I understand correctly, Zenith has an application shield for its now expired Title V permit, and it's applying for a new ACDP, which would be a lower level air emission based on the LUCS that came from the city. If I understand that correctly, the application shield, I think Lisa said, stays active and they're shielded if they have submitted timely and complete Title V permit application and kept it up to date. But I'm also hearing that they didn't actually do that because they violated it and didn't report it to you, and you're now penalizing them. So my question, part one is, what happens with that application shield in the Title V permit? And the second part of that is if the LUCS you've requested, or for other reason the ACDP is not granted, does that Title V permit still stay active, or what happens with that? Or not? Yeah.
So I can take a stab at it, and Lisa, feel free to jump in if helpful. So the first part of the question regarding the Title V permit, that is the only permit that Zenith has right now, and it is in effect, even though it is expired, because Zenith submitted a renewal application on time, and at the time that we received that, we had deemed it complete. So that's the first part. And then the second part is we cannot and we will not be able to speculate on various scenarios. So I don't know what will happen in the scenario that you posed, Nikki, or any other scenarios out there. We don't know the answers to that because we're going to have to take the information as it comes and make decisions on that, on whatever happens.
Let's see. And there was, I'm sorry, was there, did we answer the second part of that question?
I thought we did. I think Christine answered the whole question.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Lauren, do you have another question from the Q&A you'd like to read aloud?
I sure do. So the next question that I have is whether the enforcement action that we've taken, what that means for future unscheduled inspections or just inspections in general by DEQ for facilities with air quality emissions or other sources of pollution. So I think Lisa, this one's for you about what this means for future inspections.
Sorry, trying to get my camera turned on.
Okay.
Yeah, was this just specifically about Zenith, or can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can answer it specific to Zenith, but in general is how they're asking the question is, does this infraction stimulate a discussion about continuing unscheduled inspections by DEQ for facilities with air quality emissions or other sources of pollution?
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. We almost all of our inspections are unscheduled. As far as that goes, I don't want to say overcommit what we can do, because we do have I was trying to get the exact number in front of me, but we currently have over 1,000 permitted facilities in the Northwest region, and currently only 16 permit writers. So all those facilities have to be inspected on a rotating basis. But however, as with the inspection in November, we do have the authority to conduct unannounced inspections at facilities we regulate at any time. And we conduct regularly planned inspections at facilities we regulate. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
I guess I'll add one more thing that, we at any point in time can make the decision to go out on an inspection if we need to do so.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to go to the next person on my list. I have Jim. You are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is, what are the elements in the air emissions that you refer to that are thought to be of concern, and at what levels does the concern arise?
Yeah, I was curious, can you be a little more specific as to what you mean by the level of concern?
There is concern expressed over the air emissions from Zenith, and I would like to know what is in the air emissions that you're concerned about.
Well, for construction purposes, and anything that would increase air emissions, specifically regulated air pollutants, and these include criteria pollutants, particulate matter of various sizes, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides. If there is an increase in emissions based on a project, then they do need to submit some kind of a notification. Criteria pollutants are those that do have an ambient air quality standard set by EPA. In addition, depending on what the project is, there could be hazardous air pollutants. But specific emissions from Zenith, if we can work to throw a link in the chat, but we have our air quality permits online dashboard, and also we just moved into your DEQ online, but both of them will be containing the issued permits and annual reports that include all of the emissions, quantity and type emitted by Zenith throughout a calendar year.
Well, I assume that you've actually measured these pollutants in the emissions from Zenith, and I'm wondering what specific pollutants have you found in the Zenith air emissions, and what levels of concern have they reached?
Yeah, actual measured emissions, Zenith did perform emissions testing from their vapor combustion unit, which is a control device used for the marine loading. And that test report is publicly available. I don't believe it's on our website, but it may be accessible through your DEQ online. Yeah, and as far as a level of concern, that's something normally where a ambient air quality standard is violated. And in this case, we don't have any information saying that an ambient air quality standard was violated near the Zenith facility.
So you're saying that there has never been any air quality violation by Zenith?
I'm not saying that there's been an air quality violation.
There's
Saying
never
that
been.
we have not seen a monitored ambient air quality standard exceedance.
Right.
There have been permit violations in the past, yes.
The permit violations are not, however, in regard to toxic elements in the air emissions.
You know, I'd have to see each specific enforcement action to see for sure. But yeah, generally the toxic air contaminants, those are handled under Cleaner Air Oregon, and Zenith has submitted periodic air toxic emission inventories to the program.
And they've never violated them, is that correct?
I'm sorry? They've never
never violated them, is that correct?
There are no hard air toxic standards from the Cleaner Air Oregon program in place for Zenith. It is currently awaiting being called in to the program, and once it has performed a risk assessment, any emission limits or operational requirements will get incorporated into their permit.
So far as everybody knows right now, there has never been a violation by Zenith of air quality standards.
A violation of air quality. We just
I believe you've said that's true. Have you not? There has never been a measured violation.
We have not seen an ambient air quality standard violation near
Thank
the
you.
facility.
And therefore, you don't really have a serious level of concern if there's never been a violation.
Yeah, Jim, I think I just want to support David here, bring it back to the enforcement case that we did issue, which is about operating outside the scope of the Title V permit. It's not about a standard or in their
It's not about air quality.
Well, it's generally about air quality because our permit is the tool that we use to regulate air emissions. And so it's important that we know about all the facilities' air emissions, and that's why we issued the enforcement case. But it's not about the violation of a specific air quality standard.
Right. So there have been measurements made of Zenith emissions, and there has never been a violation.
Yeah, I think we would need to review. What we're here today is to talk about the specific enforcement case that we issued on December 6th. There have been some warning letters in the past. I think that's why we're not wanting to spend a lot of detail on that, because we want to be careful and give accurate answers. But the enforcement case we issued recently is about operating outside the scope of the Title V permit.
Right. I'm going to have to move on just because we have a little under 20 minutes remaining, and I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask a question. And if we have some more time after that at the end of the list for more questions, I will invite anybody who has a follow-up. But just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to ask a question. Thank you, Jim, for your good questions, and thank you, David and Becca. So next up, Lauren, do you have a Q&A written question that you would like to read aloud?
I do. Thank you. I have a few more enforcement questions for you, Becca. And one is about whether Zenith has yet appealed, and if and how DEQ announces when that happens. And then a second one about how the penalties for Zenith are calculated, including economic benefit.
Okay, Zenith has not yet appealed. Like I said, they have 20 days from when they receive our certified mail copy of the order to appeal. We have not made a decision to announce that or not, but we're generally trying to be transparent, and the appeal would be a public record. And then what was it? Can you repeat the second question, Lauren?
Yeah, then the second question was, let me see, I just was about how we calculated the penalty, including any economic benefit that Zenith receives through its operations.
Sure. I'm happy to answer that, and I would refer you to what's called the exhibits in our enforcement case, which is up on the website. And so DEQ follows a formula for calculating its penalties, and we actually put each part of that formula in writing in the exhibit, and that's partially to allow the respondent to respond and to how we calculated the penalty and to make sure we're going through each part of that formula. And it's based on the facts and the information that the agency has. And so we went through and put the rules that we applied and the findings of fact that we had based on the information we had available. And those are all in the exhibits that you can see to the enforcement order.
Great. And I'm going to be putting the webpage and the Gov Delivery listserv in the chat again. So just make sure you're keyed into both of those where a lot of the updates happen.
Thank you. I'm going to invite the next person on my list to ask a question. Kathy, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. So I know in our state, we don't require facilities to say what they're receiving, if they're receiving crude oil. And I'm wondering if you know what Zenith is receiving. If you know at the McCall dock, has there been more than 95% renewables coming through? Do you have any indication of what the percentage is between crude oil and renewables?
Thanks, Kathy. I'm going to invite David to answer a question. He is just let me know that Zoom is freezing up on him, so bear with us for just a moment. While David is getting his Zoom back in, Lisa or Becca, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in. One of the pieces of information we recently requested from Zenith is marine loading records that they keep. And so that shows what products they're loading onto marine vessels. And I haven't done, or I'm not even sure David has done, like an analysis of those. We looked at them for purposes of permitting and enforcement, but we have those records which show the different types of fuels. And the McCall dock is all diesel and renewable diesel.
Thank you. Okay, so Lauren, you're back up. Do you have another written question that you'd like to read aloud?
Yes. All right. We have a couple folks who asked the question about DEQ not detecting or not knowing about the unpermitted construction at Zenith. So I think the fundamental question here that we got is, can you answer how the unpermitted construction went on so long without being detected?
Oops, I can start, and then David, if you have any additional information I miss, if you let me know, then I'll be glad to read it. But I guess maybe a couple things. As David noted, our last inspection before last month was in 2022, and so that I'm sure have have an inspection report from that day. I don't know that we were looking for the specifics of what we looked for when we went out last month. So that's, that is, one of the factors for sure. But as I noted earlier, when we after we had our last meeting and we did a deep dive, we realized that we needed some additional information, which is why we are where we are today. And I want to note that as DEQ's Northwest Region Administrator, my expectation is that we resolve any permit issues or incompleteness before we're out on public notice, which is partially why we pause the permit process. So we should have caught this, and we didn't until recently, and that's why we are where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to my next person on my list. Ruff, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. I'm curious if Zenith currently has the proper easements for all operations, and in the past, if they've had the proper easements permitted or not between 2018 and now.
I can answer that. Easements is a question about their ability to use the land, and so that's really a question between them and the person who owns the property. So I think that's not a question we can answer.
Sorry, Ruff, I muted you as you were just beginning to speak, so sorry about that.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your question. Lauren, do you have another question that you'd like to read out?
Sure do. Based on Zenith's consistent history of violations and non-compliance, what evidence do you have that it is reasonable to believe that the company will operate within compliance if DEQ issues another permit? Yeah, Christine.
Yep, that's mine. Thank you for the question. So our role at DEQ is to use all of our regulatory authorities to implement Oregon's environmental laws. To do that, we do lots of things, including inspections, we ask questions, we evaluate reports, and we use all that information to evaluate compliance. We will continue to use all of our authorities to ensure Zenith, as well as all the facilities that we regulate, is in compliance with Oregon's environmental laws.
Thanks, Christine. I'm going to now call on the next person on my list. Jan, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Great, thank you so much. Given that Zenith is and will continue to be a fossil fuel company, and given that a significant amount of Zenith's throughput was transloaded through McCall Dock in 2023, and given that it is attempting to incorporate 2 additional docks into its land use approvals, which it illegally used to transport fossil fuels, if an infrastructure that it promised would be exclusively used for renewables. Can you explain how this is not an expansion of fossil fuel facility?
I can start that one. Thanks for the question, Jan. As it relates to the expansion regarding a fossil fuel facility, those are questions for the city of Portland. At DEQ, our job is to regulate the emissions that come from the activity at the facility. We use all of the authorities that we have as it relates to permitting, but the Zenith's work with the city of Portland regarding if they're using renewables or non-renewables are between the city and Zenith, not between DEQ and Zenith. Again, we just regulate the emissions that they emit or are proposing to emit.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan, and thanks, Christine. Lauren, is there another written question for us?
Yes, and this one is about the LUCS and kind of the specific issue with it. So this question reads, I believe that the specific problem with the LUCS was that the description of the tax lots covered by the existing LUCS did not match the tax lots in the permit application. If a new LUCS is issued, what aspects of the LUCS are relevant besides the tax lots covered?
I can take this one. And oh, were you going to go ahead, Lisa?
No. Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. And you can jump in, Christine, if I leave anything out. But whenever we are evaluating the LUCS, we're looking for the same things to make sure that the activities are also covered, which they, in their current LUCS, those activities that they are doing are covered in that LUCS. Any additional information you want to add, Christine?
Nope. Thanks.
Yeah, no, we just want to just kind of remind folks that we're asking for those activities to be spelled out in those locations, or all those tax lots that they're operating on. Okay, so next I've got on my list, Susan. You are welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Okay, I'm just wondering, did Zenith use directional boring to install a pipe under Front Avenue? And if so, what permits were required? And did Zenith have all of the necessary permits? Can you hear me?
I can,
We can hear you.
yeah,
Okay.
I can chime in a bit on that one. So with
Okay, great.
with regards to the McCall pipe, it was an existing asphalt pipeline, and they cleaned it out in between transitioning it to the distillates. So there wasn't any underground construction associated with that.
Okay.
With regards to their proposed project, they have not yet begun construction on it. So they have not done any type of drilling with regards to those pipelines.
Okay, so there were no permits that they needed to get.
I'm not aware of any permitting, but I'm only working on the air quality with regards to emissions. So I don't know what permits additionally may be required for that kind of activity.
Huh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. And do we have, Lauren, another question in the Q&A for us?
Yeah, we just got a follow-up to Susan's question. I don't know if we know all of this, but who did the clean out to establish the pipe connection to the McCall dock? How was the flushing activity done without the proper permits? And questioning what that means about Zenith's contractors. But before we get there, I just want to see if someone can speak to whether this is something that we regulate the flushing of, if someone can speak to that.
Yeah, I can just note we can't answer any questions that are not related to the air quality permit, which we're here. That's what we're here for tonight. I will just have to leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Just moving alongside, trying to move through or raise hands as quickly as possible. It's sort of 6:58. So, Lynn, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, so my question, do the annual reports that are submitted to DEQ by Zenith, do they state that they state that it was operating in compliance with its permits? I assume that they say we're in compliance with our permits, right? I guess. Assuming that they do, does the discovery of the illegal expansion render all the annual reports inaccurate, which obviously they were, So more importantly, what is the process for addressing that? Are there penalties for submitting inaccurate annual reports?
Yeah, with regards to the annual report, Zenith has to supply a semi-annual certification of compliance. And what they have to do with that is list each permit condition and then include whether or not they've been in full compliance or if they've had deviations associated with that. The issue has been that the McCall docs were not the projects post permit issuance haven't fully been incorporated into the permit. So those were not permit conditions listed as part of their certification of compliance. Now, as Becca had presented, the violation is still a violation, and that's why the enforcement action has been taken with regards to the McCall dock handling.
Right, but I get that. But so the DEQ is acknowledging that their annual reports were incomplete because it didn't include the stuff that they just got busted for. So doesn't that mean those annual reports are incorrect? And shouldn't there be some way to address that and penalties and stuff? Or is this just another we did it wrong, bummer, and move on?
I think, Becca, if you're able to chime in on this aspect, really, because yeah, the report does list the applicable permit conditions, but yeah, as I mentioned, not all of them got incorporated into their Title V permit. And really the smoothest and quick best way forward is to make sure that there is a full complete permit that Zenith operates under so that everything is listed there and compliance determinations can be made based on a permit that covers their entire operations.
I mean, I think we also want to say, like, if they've been operating illegally and not reporting it correctly, then I feel like there should also be consequence, not as well as a complete permit. I mean, that permit application, that all makes sense, but like, what are the consequences? It seems like there's often not consequence. And yeah.
So then I think David gave a good answer in that the annual reports focus on what's in the permit and our enforcement cases focused on what's out of the permit. Now that activity is in the permit, they're going to need to report on it. So,
okay.
We took the action that we thought fit the facts that we had and the violations that we could cite.
And I'd also like to add that, and someone on our team, correct me if I'm wrong, but the emissions from the usage of the McCall dock were incorporated into their annual reports, into the emissions that were that Zenith admitted in those years of that usage. So I feel like that's important to share as well. I'm going to move on to, it's because we're past time, so I'm going to try to get through our raised hands, our next three or so. So I've got Michael Mintz. You are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Well, I was in the chat with Lauren, and because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to unmute myself. So you guys have heard this, she's heard this question, but my question was, would Zenith have the capacity to handle the throughput amounts projected after 2027 in the ACDP without the use of the McCall dock? And Lauren responded to me, well, whether Zenith could handle that or not is a capacity question for Zenith, that you guys aren't involved in business operations. And frankly, I'm not sure what to make of that answer. If they don't have the capacity without the McCall dock to handle the throughput amounts, I mean, there's just kind of a disconnect there, it seems to me. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. Thank you, Lauren, for your reply, but it just seems like a disconnect. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Now for I guess anybody that didn't see our response in the chat is Lauren, would you like to maybe just kind of reiterate what you said there?
I
And
will do that.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so let's see. Next, raise hand. I've got Nikki again. Please, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you again, and appreciate the extra couple of minutes you're giving us. I'm still confused about the application shield and the new permit. And so I want to ask a LUCS question. I'll try and stay off of the city here. But is there more than one LUCS involved in this whole thing now? And I don't mean like the speculatory, like what may come, but there was a LUCS from 2022 that was submitted with the ACDP application, which you have now found not sufficient. Is that related to Title V, or do they have an existing LUCS that's out there related to their Title V permit that's kind of got the shield? So how many LUCSs does DEQ actually have from Zenith that are operational, whether you consider them sufficient or not, that you've accepted as LUCSs?
So I can provide a little bit of context here. Let me see. And I just locked up again.
David, we can still hear you though,
Oh, you
even
can
though we
still
can't
hear
see
me.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Yeah, we currently have two LUCS for the Zenith facility. One of them was the 2022 LUCS associated with the ACDP application and Title V renewal. There was also a separate LUCS associated with a stormwater project. So really depending on what point in time we're looking at, there may be an individual LUCS that could supersede the previous LUCSs. And we would say in the permit, yep, this specific LUCS authorizes the air permit. Or there could be multiple LUCS if there are different parcels or different projects that have occurred on different tax lots. So really, we just want to make sure that we do have full authorization for the activities being performed on the specific properties that they are at.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so could I just ask about the stormwater project LUCS? Would that be, like, I don't know what's in there. Is that the sort of thing that could, like, if the ACDP one from 2022 isn't good, is the stormwater one, because it was for stormwater, something that they could put into the ACDP permit, or that would count towards the Title V permit application?
I can answer that one. So to go back to the beginning of the presentation, we have to have a permit application that requests a permit for certain activities that matches the land use compatibility statement from the local jurisdiction as it relates to the project and the location. So all of those things have to be involved. So as it relates to the stormwater permit that we have a LUCS for, that is specifically for the activities on the Zenith's property that are associated with the construction activities. So to answer your question in a different way, because that land use compatibility statement is specifically for the stormwater project that Zenith has proposed to do, that's how it can be used. It's not, it doesn't have all the information that the 2022 land use compatibility statement has from the city associated with the air permit application.
And is there a Title V related LUCS that's still out there then?
David, are you able to?
Yeah.
There you are.
So the LUCS used for, or at least cited in the initial, or the current Title V permit, the one that expired, I believe it was issued in 2007. Yeah, that LUCS exists. We do have a copy of it. However, the October 2022 LUCS is what Zenith had provided for both the ACDP application and as an updated LUCS as part of the Title V renewal application.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question. We're about 10 minutes past time. I don't believe this person was able to ask their question yet. Stacy, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we're going to move to wrap up this meeting.
Great. Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. So we smell the emissions every single night, and we've lived here for like 36 years, and we want to know what exactly is it? Nothing could smell that horrendous and not be something concerning. And it doesn't matter who we've asked or who we've talked to, we never can get a concrete answer. And it doesn't seem compatible that if I ask for a city permit to make my home rebuilt, I would have to do every single thing on that list. And if I didn't, then therefore I lost my chance. More importantly, if I lied, I would not be able to get that permit. I would have lost my chance. And I seem to find it concerning and upsetting that Zenith can almost basically do whatever they want without anybody stepping in and saying, hey guys, you lied. This is what you're doing to the neighborhood. This is what happens. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Stacy. And as I noted a little bit earlier, DEQ, as it relates to the Zenith facility and all the facilities we regulate, we use all the authorities that we have that are available to us. And I will note that if you have not done so before, I would encourage you, if you have a complaint that you'd like to submit for any facility or any environmental issue that you come across, we have a form on our website under environmental complaints, and we review all of the complaints that we receive, and it's very helpful information for us to have them and to follow up. So thank you.
We have done so. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Stacy. Thanks, Christine. All right, so we're about 11 minutes past time, so we're gonna wrap up this meeting. I wanted to point out that to Michael's question earlier, a couple questions ago about the throughput, Lauren put that answer in the chat for everyone to see, so that's out there in case you didn't see that yet. But before we wrap up, I want to let everyone know, again, this is recorded. We'll find a way to make this available. This presentation, I will also put this on our Zenith webpage, which was linked in the chat. Again, I encourage folks that are interested in staying on top of all of these updates to sign up for that Gov delivery list, because any updates that we have to share will go through that email list, as well as being uploaded on our website. And yeah, we are committed to being transparent, and we'll continue to share information as we have more. We just know that these updates from the past couple of months, there's been a kind of a lot going on, and we really appreciate your time with us tonight to learn more about what happened and to ask you really good questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to invite Christine back to close us out for the night.
All right. Thanks, Michael. And thank you all again for joining us tonight and for your continued interest in our work. As I noted earlier, we will share updates when we have them. So thanks for being here, and hope you all have an enjoyable evening or rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.